You stand up from the floor. Your baby is playing, distracted, happy. You take 2 steps toward the kitchen, maybe 3, and the crying starts. Not fussy crying, the deep, panicked, end-of-the-world crying that makes you feel like you just committed a crime by needing a glass of water. You stop, you come back, you pick them up, and somewhere in the back of your mind a voice says, "They're fine, they're just being clingy." Developmental psychologists at some of the most respected research institutions in the world have spent decades studying exactly what happens inside an infant's brain at the moment you disappear from view. And what they found doesn't just explain the crying, it changes what you understand about how human trust is built. The most common explanation is habit. The baby has learned that crying brings you back, so they cry. It's a strategy, a tiny manipulation. They want your attention, and they figured out the fastest way to get it. That makes sense on the surface. Babies do learn cause and effect early. They learn that dropping a spoon makes a sound. They learn that smiling gets a smile back. So it seems reasonable that crying when you leave is just another learned behavior, a button they've learned to push. Except here's what that theory cannot explain. Babies as young as 6 months who have not had enough repetitions to build a conditioned behavioral loop show the exact same panic response. Their heart rate spikes, their breathing changes, their cortisol floods. That is not strategy. That is not manipulation. And what is actually happening inside their bodies is something researchers didn't fully understand until they looked at what the baby does when you come back. In the 1970s, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth at the University of Virginia designed what became one of the most replicated experiments in the history of child psychology, published across multiple journals and cited thousands of times since. It's called the Strange Situation Protocol. The setup was deceptively simple. A mother and her 12-month-old baby are placed in an unfamiliar room. The mother leaves, a stranger enters, then the mother returns. Ainsworth wasn't measuring whether the babies cried, she was measuring what happened when the mother came back. What the data revealed reorganized the entire field. Babies didn't just miss their mothers, they sorted into distinct response patterns, categories Ainsworth called attachment styles. Some babies cried and were easily comforted on return. Some cried and could not be soothed. Some didn't cry at all and actively turned away from the mother when she reappeared. That last group troubled researchers the most. What Ainsworth had uncovered was not a behavior, it was a blueprint. Each baby was revealing the internal working model they had already built about whether the world was safe, like an emotional operating system, drafted entirely from what happens when they need you and you are or are not there. But here's where it gets even stranger. Because the crying is only part of what is happening. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin's Weizmann Center conducted studies measuring cortisol levels, the body's primary stress hormone, in infants during brief separations. What they documented introduced a concept now central to developmental neuroscience, the stress activation response. When you leave the room, your baby's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis fires, the same biological alarm system that activates in adults during genuine threat. Your baby's brain does not distinguish between you going to the bathroom and you disappearing forever. It cannot. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that would contextualize, rationalize, whisper, "She'll be right back," does not come online for years. Your baby is experiencing your absence the way you would experience a fire alarm in a building with no exits. Not because they are fragile, because the part of the brain that manages fear is fully operational, and the part that manages perspective simply does not exist yet. You are their regulation system. When you leave, that system goes offline. And the experiment that revealed just how deep this goes is one that still unsettles people who see it for the first time. In 1975, Developmental psychologist Dr. Edward Tronick at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, designed a study that would become one of the most viewed research demonstrations in history, an experiment so simple in its design and so disturbing in its results that it changed how clinicians understood the infant mind. It's called the still face experiment. A mother sits face to face with her baby. She plays, responds, mirrors. The baby is engaged, happy, connected. Then Tronick asked the mother to stop, not to leave, just to hold a completely neutral, unresponsive expression. The baby notices immediately, smiles at the mother, points, reaches. Nothing comes back. The baby tries harder, vocalizes, waves both arms. Then they collapse, they turn away, they cry. In under 2 minutes, the baby goes from joy to despair, not because the mother left the room, but because the mother stopped responding. Tronick's conclusion shook the field. For an infant, emotional absence is processed identically to physical absence. Your baby doesn't just need you in the room, they need you present, responsive, attuned. It is not separation itself that causes the deepest distress. It is the rupture of connection. And what this means for you goes deeper than anyone expected. There's one layer to this that almost no one outside developmental neuroscience circles discusses, and it involves what these moments of leaving and returning are actually constructing inside your baby's brain. Researchers at the Harvard Center on the Developing Child have shown that the pattern of separation and responsive return, what they call serve and return interaction, directly shapes the architecture of the prefrontal cortex and the stress regulation circuits that govern emotional resilience for life. Every time you leave and come back calmly, every time you respond to the distress rather than dismiss it, you are laying down neural wiring. You are teaching your baby's brain that stress is survivable, that rupture can be repaired, that the world breaks and mends. The density of synaptic connections in the orbital frontal cortex, the brain region responsible for reading social cues and regulating emotional responses, is directly correlated with the quality of these early rupture and repair cycles. You are not just comforting your baby, you are building the brain they will use to handle every difficult moment for the rest of their life. So now I need to tell you about the warning. If your baby shows extreme distress when you leave and cannot be soothed when you return, or, on the other end, shows no reaction at all, no relief when you come back, as if your presence and absence are interchangeable, that is worth paying attention to. It does not mean something is wrong. Temperament varies enormously. Some babies are more sensitive to transitions. Some are naturally more independent explorers. But attachment researchers are clear that consistent patterns of either inconsolable distress or complete indifference to a caregiver's departure by 12 to 18 months are among the earliest signals worth discussing with a pediatrician. The brain's plasticity in the first 24 months is extraordinary. What can be supported at 10 months becomes significantly harder to redirect at 3 years. Early identification of insecure attachment patterns changes outcomes. If something about the way your baby responds to your leaving or your returning feels off, trust that. You have studied this child's face more closely than any researcher ever could. That is not intuition, that is data. So the next time you stand up and your baby's face crumbles, you will know what is actually happening. Their brain is not manipulating you. It is searching for you, scanning for the signal that says the world is still safe, still whole, still held. 200,000 years of human evolution built this response for one reason, because for most of our history, a baby whose caregiver disappeared was a baby who might not survive. That cry is not weakness. It is the oldest survival system our species carries. If this changed how you hear that sound, subscribe to this channel. And tell me in the comments, what does your baby do the exact moment you walk back into the room? Because that reunion reaction might matter even more than the cry itself. And if you want to understand why babies reach for strangers willingly, but then scream the instant they are actually handed over, that is the next video. And the neuroscience behind it reveals something about how infant trust works that no one expects before.